Good, thank you. Welcome everyone to a Hartland Selectboard meeting. As folks know, this is an executive session tonight. So we'll have just 2 agenda items, and then the third item is for the board to go into executive session. The first item to ask for any adjustments to the agenda. Okay. Hearing none, then we'll go right into public comments. I would like to make a brief comment before we start. If it's okay with everyone. Again, thank you for coming tonight. I want to say thank you to Brian for your courage in bringing up what we did last week. But most important, I also want to thank our other town staff, all of whom have, kind of contribute to making our town a good place, and the managers who took part in a process that I'll mention in a moment. I want to back up right now before we begin to ensure that everyone is aware of the work that we as a select board have been doing. Last year, when I became chair, I became aware that there had not been any performance reviews done in town whatsoever. We as a select board spent time talking about that, and then last spring and summer started creating the infrastructure to hold reviews. As a result, for the town manager position review, we surveyed the department heads and reviewed those findings. In an attempt to be as professional as possible, we hired an HR consultant. Again, this is August, maybe of last year. The HR consultant reviewed those findings and presented the board with the results. We as a board finalized the review, and in late fall sat down with the town manager to discuss the review. This evening, we will hear your comments on the business at hand that we will be addressing in the executive session. I want to remind everyone that this is not a hearing, so there will be no back and forth. We appreciate the input we receive from the staff and the public, and want you to know that we support our staff. We believe in fairness and the due process, and we need time as a board to discuss these issues. Therefore, we ask that the comments be brief and limited to personal experiences, not hearsay. May I ask for a show of hands of folks who would like to speak tonight so we can figure out how much time to allot? 3. Okay, I'd like to have dinner before 10. Okay, so we'll do 5 minutes or something like that. Okay, what we will do that is allow each person 5 minutes to speak, if that's appropriate, or less. Okay, let's begin. Who would like to come forward to make a comment?
Good evening. My name is Stacy Bradley. I am here in my capacity as a chair of the Board of Listers. Last Wednesday, our board called a meeting to discuss events that have transpired and unfolded. And for full disclosure, I did reach out to Phil in my capacity as a chair, in his capacity as a chair, just to touch base to say we were basically going to kind of keep our heads down and let you guys do your job. The 3 of us listers, Bob Quadrer, Cheyenne Latimer, and myself, just want it to be known and aware in light of a lot of the public discussion that's been bandied about. And this is not said in any way to invalidate or negate anyone else's experience, but simply just share our truth, which is in the 2 years that Bob has served as Lister and worked, the 2.5 years Cheyenne has worked and served as Lister, and the 5 years that I have served and worked as a Lister here in town, what has been shared has not been our experience in working with Dave Ormiston. We have a good working relationship with him. We sort of always have, and we continue to. We are aware that we are elected officials as opposed to hired employees, and that may perhaps play a part or not. But we just felt it important to state that, and also to let you guys know that even though we're only a board of 3 and a small board, that we support you as a select board and trust that you will make the right decisions to navigate through this difficult situation in the best way possible for all employees, keeping in mind of the precedents that of the things that you do sets precedents for all employees in the town in the future as well. And so that we're just in support and sort of standing with you folks as you deal with this difficult situation, and thank you. And that's basically all I have to say on that.
Reading my notes.
Good evening, board, and thank you for this opportunity for people to speak concerns about the DRAD slightly. Each of you may feel, particularly people who are new to the board, they feel like this is the first time you've heard about and perhaps had to address the issue of the town manager's behavior. You may be tempted to be cautious and try a gentle solution, as we all would be tempted to do. Keep in mind, though, that the issue has been known to the select board for several years, and it persists to this day. Whatever remedies have been tried have not worked. The problem persists to this day. The time for caution and gentleness is long past. I strongly urge the board to immediately place Mr. Ormiston on leave, as is common in a situation like this, and begin your fair and thoughtful investigation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Anyone else? Tell us off for again.
Most of you probably know me, Rebecca Genovese. Been a resident here in town for 51 years and a tax-paying homeowner for 6. My buying a house coincided with the beginning of Mr. Ormiston's starting as our town manager. And I sent out a fairly lengthy letter to all of you, unfortunately, not until 5 o'clock today. I don't have email at my house anymore. I don't have internet at my house anymore. Because since the meeting of July 5th last year, when I unfortunately got blacklisted by somebody in town and it got left to sit there, I don't really care to see any of that. And I'm disappointed that we just sat through possibly the quietest, if you're new to town and you're new to public discourse and you're new to speaking up in a small town where we have direct democracy, where it is an unbelievable gift that prior to this administration, Hartland, Vermont was the shining star of open communicative discourse, of an outstandingly friendly town. And somehow that has really changed. And it makes me incredibly sad. This is a town manager whose increasingly autocratic leadership has turned us from a positive, vibrant community into a town harshly divided, who in many cases is hesitant to speak up. I had no idea I had any support at all. And I'm glad that people spoke up and supported Brian's efforts, because that took a lot to do, especially when, as many of us feel, we have worked through the channels. I attend meetings, we write letters. I try to stay positive. And I get beaten up at meetings, often by the town manager. And in one case, your chair asked us to stop ganging up on poor Dave after he had just dressed down someone in a meeting. That's not acceptable. Okay, we have decreasing public participation in what was kind of, that was like the public social event. And I think that's attributable to a certain tone of this administration, where it doesn't feel like it does any good. And I would echo what was just last said, in that you have known about this as a problem for at least a year. And there were other issues concerning this person's authoritative style, where things are primarily in his control and you act as his board of approval. As a citizen, that's a little bit maddening sometimes, I gotta tell you, because some of us are really put in a lot of effort over the last year and it's not going anywhere. So Phil, I really appreciate you enlightening us into that. In fact, something is being done and has been done, because as a general public, it doesn't feel that way. And it doesn't really feel like it's improving. This is the town manager who had the gall to stand up in an Act 250 hearing when asked to speak on behalf of the town and said, I'm just here to help you, and wouldn't make a statement on behalf of the town. Nothing at all. I find that problematic. He works for us, the taxpayers, and you are our elected representatives. And we entrusted with you the ability to think things through. I see a lack, unfortunately, of public discussion amongst this group. I see positioning. I see last minute decisions constantly coming from someone who isn't even part of your board, but yet sits at the end and directs you. What's going on there? How are we supposed to feel represented? It doesn't feel good. And it's starting to feel dangerous to speak up in town. And I felt that way all summer, and I'm tired of sticking my neck out. I agree that he actually should have been put on leave last week. But I want you to remember also that you have the power to demand his resignation. And as someone who's a former PhD student in public administration at a top university program, my final public law paper was on public official dismissals. And the really sad part of it is that usually it's not pretty, but it's neat, it's tidy, and it's the closest to a win-win you can get. Because if he wants to stay in public administration and work in the area, going further wastes our time for another year of us managing the manager and his behavior and his autocratic decisions and his stepping outside of the boundaries of what his duties are in fact supposed to be as delineated by statute. And that's up to you guys to kind of keep an eye on that. And I'm a little bit tired of all of us having to keep an eye on it. I'm asking you to take a firm stance. And I'm suggesting that perhaps asking for his resignation. And maybe everyone comes to their senses and recognizes that there is a long track record of things. And you're right, to come in and find out that nobody had been evaluated, I wondered the same thing. But I'm really glad that someone brought that up and that it at least began. I think that across the board, town-wide, we need to have a more and better defined positions. I think they need to be listed outside of listserv. I think there need to be known qualifications and more than one person interviewing them. I think that there needs to be regular evaluations. You know, that's just good policy. And it doesn't feel like we've had a culture of that. It feels like right now in town, as a small landowner, we have a culture of might makes right, and I'm uncomfortable with that. And everyone else should be too. Thank you.
Please, we don't need. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say, oh, Andrea, yes, Andrea Ambrose. And sorry, a little bit late, but thank you for taking my comment. I think Mandy Potter, very much the one select board member who actually replied that you received receipt of my letter to all members of the select board. I will say, so that other folks will be aware, that I made a formal complaint back in December of 2020 regarding disrespectful, inappropriate, unprofessional behavior by David Ormiston. And I didn't get much of a response at all. I did get an email back from Phil Hobby, but it just didn't go anywhere and it didn't feel good. There were subsequently a number of other emails and verbal exchanges with David Ormiston over the course of the next few months. And I have to say, it was one of the most frustrating things that I've ever had to deal with. And a little less than a year ago, I came before this select board to say that Hartland Winter Trails was officially separating from the town of Hartland. And I remember Phil asking Dave if he was aware of this, and he said, no, this is a surprise to me. It's interesting that he stated that that was a surprise to him, but I will say that a huge reason for separating from the town was my difficulties interacting with David Ormiston and the stress that it has caused me over this last 2 years. It's been tremendous. So thank you all for accepting my letter. I just wanted to make sure that the folks that are new on the board was that you were aware that this had occurred, and that I did have a meeting with Phil Hobby in December 2020, in which at that meeting I stated several times I am making a formal complaint. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Please.
Ariel Arwen. I've written about this to the board. I did not want to put it on the listserv, but somehow at this moment I'm inspired to say it publicly because it references something that happened 4 years ago, and it was followed up about a month ago. So it might give some shine a light on what has and hasn't changed with Dave. So I'm on the energy committee, and about 4 years ago, I was the person writing the minutes. And I was very late with the minutes. In fact, it was about a day before our meeting. And the minutes oftentimes remind people of actions that we had decided on at the previous meeting. And so that, I was a terrible minute taker, because at that time, that was a common thing for me, that I was late. at any rate, we needed some information on the Irving oil bills because we were doing an analysis of energy costs and energy use. And the chair at the time, Laurel Stevenson, had written to Dave asking for those records. And that very morning, he had written back to Laurel saying he was finally freed up from budget concerns and he would get them to her, but I did not know that. And so I went into Martin's office and asked Martin if he could pull the file so that I could look at it and supply the data for our meeting so I wouldn't be remiss. And Dave saw me going into Martin's office, came in and asked what I was doing. And I explained it, and he started screaming in my face, like really close to me. And I tried to say, and he said, I just wrote that to Laurel and, da. And I said, I haven't talked to Laurel. And he didn't even try to hear what my issue was, that I had messed up with the minutes. I was trying to tell him. And he said, well, maybe you should talk to Laurel. Maybe you should tell the select board what you're doing. And he was really out of bounds. And I left. And a couple of weeks later, I saw Martin. I was out on my bike and he was outside. And I said, gee, I hope I didn't get you into trouble, because he was trying to give me the file. And he said, oh, everyone has bad days. That's what Martin said. I could add that a friend of mine used to be a lister and reported to me that the listers could sometimes hear Dave screaming at Martin. So I think Martin just is a good soldier and takes it. At any rate, I never reported Dave. It didn't occur to me to report him to the board. So about a month, in the last couple of months, I came in and talked to Dave for many hours about the three-corner thing, because I really wanted to understand it and inform myself, because I had been remiss in following select board meetings. And I was pleased that he had, a really personable demeanor. Before I came in, I talked to him on the phone one time. And I told him that ever since 4 years ago, when he got angry at me, I thought that he had hated me. And I carried that around for 4 years. And he said, oh, things, they come in and they go out with me, they don't stick in me. But I do remember it was about Irving oil bills. And then I said, I really thought you hated me ever since then. So I was trying to communicate. I said, I wanted to come in and talk to you about the misunderstanding, but I didn't want to, I was afraid. And his only comment was, yes, I remember I was really angry. So when I read the Valley News article that indeed his job performance had been evaluated in a mixed fashion, and that whoever communicated with him was hoping that he would reform his ways and regarded a certain incidents as slippage, I thought to myself, wow, so someone has talked to him over time about his anger issues, and yet he still could not realize that he should have apologized to me. So that is the thing that really got my attention, is that even 4 years later, with me being honest with him, all he could say was, yes, I was really angry. And he still doesn't seem to realize that behaving that way is completely unprofessional and should be apologized for. So forgive me for repeating the story I've already written to you, but I'm grateful to Brian that he brought many of our stories to the surface. So thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? And shut up the time.
I'll make my comments very brief because most of you know the incident that happened to us.
Can you state your name?
Oh,
for the
I'm
record?
sorry, I'm Dan Gottsigan. And I also posted something on the listserv back in November, but I know that the select board does not follow the listserv that has no official standing. But I know that most of you know what happened to us because I've sent documents to you asking for some small remediation to what we perceive as real material harm that was done to us in the misapplication of state policy and the misreading of a recommendation of the Two Rivers Ottauquechee Regional Commission REI report recommendation about road ditching. The specifics, the loss of a number of mature trees that we had and an historic stone wall are hard for us, and we would still like our stone wall to be replaced because it was a 200-year-old wall. But the real issue that bears on what's happening tonight is that in all our dealings around that, we found that information was withheld from us. There was a plan for the work that was to be done that was not given us before the work was done. It was only given to us by the contractor hired by the town after the damage was done because he was shocked we did not have that plan. What was described to us before the work was done was completely different than what was actually done. And then in our ongoing dealings, the stories, or I should say excuses, kept changing over time. There was never acknowledgement that mistakes were made. The word autocratic was used earlier. That was our experience. We also felt that we were treated dismissively. Now, I should say I've lived in Hartland for 25 years. And I have a great awareness of our road and water issues there and so forth and so on. We also found there was a lack of understanding even about the right of way of our road, which we've well documented since then. So the real issue, without getting into the specifics.
Yeah, Dan, what I'd like you to do is just, I'm trying to hear the town manager's issues. I understand the road piece, I'm very empathetic.
So the real
We're trying to
issue for us
focus on that.
was the way we were dealt with. We were dealt with dismissively. Information was withheld from us and stories were consistently changing. We felt that was an MO and that caused us grave concern. And we think that we support the idea that there should be a change. I should also say to you that as an artist who does public artworks throughout Vermont, I've had dealings with other town managers. I'm not a resident of those towns, but it's a very different kind of behavior in some other towns. And I also have seen the loss of community activity and volunteer spirit in this town in the time I've been here. And I myself have reluctant to be involved in town affairs because of what's been happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
I would just make a quick statement that I really appreciate Andrea bringing up that being treated like this by a public official and having things not seeming to go anywhere when really try to work with the public process is incredibly stressful. And I have experienced incredible stress because of this treatment. And although the road is not the issue tonight, we got in a screaming match on the phone because of the lack of a road plan and disclosure of, was there any plan other than continuously taking 3 feet off the front of my property every year, doing something, again, different every year, decreasingly effective every year. And I'm getting yelled at as the person on site who hand digs that front so that it doesn't inundate my whole yard with the entire drain off of French Hill. But I don't apparently know anything about that. That's insulting. It's demeaning. His comments were extremely sexist towards me because I was actually working on a drainage project with a whole team in Queechee at the time. And I don't appreciate that. So I hope you're hearing what's being said here, because there's some real common themes.
Other comments? Dave?
I hadn't planned to come up because I was putting up some fence and I lifted something too heavy, but I'm gonna do it anyhow. This is just a question to everybody here. There's been a number of phone calls to my house because of my other position. So as you don't, those of you who call know, but I am a judge in Windsor County, and I would beg that you don't call me. I have to disengage because at some point, something may come up in our court. And a lot of my personal opinions will make it very difficult to engage in this. So I ask everybody, please refrain, and that's not admonishing anybody, believe me, I know this is very emotional. So if you please honor that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Then I would like to entertain a motion to invite a non-board member or town attorney to join our executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Jim, do you have the language for the executive session?
I do, but my fingers are a little sore in my brain, so.
I need to text the attorney, so forgive me, I'm not ordering dinner or something.
I'd like to make a motion to enter executive session to discuss employee performance and evaluations pursuant to 1 VSA 313A3.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you again, everyone, for coming, and we will likely not have any action tonight. If there is an action, that will likely be coincide with an agenda item on the next meeting.
Thank you for extending more than 5 minutes to us.
Yeah, so do I understand that you will reconvene after the executive session in a public and then
We have
do any business?
We have to read the exit session as a part of the meeting, but we're not having any action.
To get a member of the public.
The town attorney's not-
I